She was bound by ancient chains until his touch unleashed her power. On the dying planet Clyon, the ancient ruins of a once great civilization hide more than forgotten memories. Jake Miller, the rogue captain of the Stellar Fox, thought he was on another salvage job. But as his ship descended into the stormy, cracked landscape, nothing could have prepared him for the desperate plea that crackled through his comm system. Help! Trapped! Release me! What began as a simple mission to retrieve an ancient tech treasure quickly spirals into something far more dangerous. Inside the fortress of Clyon, Jake finds Lyra, a beautiful alien woman with violet skin, locked in a glowing cage, her very existence tied to an ancient, malevolent power. She pleads for release, but freeing her unleashes a chain of events that could either save the galaxy or doom it. Now, Jake and his crew must navigate hostile forces, treacherous betrayals, and their own simmering desires as they uncover the truth behind the flame that binds Lyra. Will Jake be able to resist the magnetic pull of the woman who has captivated him? Or will they both fall victim to the ancient power they have unwittingly unleashed? Don't miss the rest of the story. Hit that subscribe button. It's free, and you'll get access to more thrilling adventures like this. Thank you for your support, and get ready for the wild ride ahead. The Stellar Fox shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning like a wounded beast. Jake Miller gripped the pilot's controls, his knuckles white against the worn leather grips. Through the viewport, the planet Clyon loomed, a jagged orb of black rock and swirling gray storms, a graveyard of a long-dead civilization. From orbit, its surface looked like a cracked skull, dotted with the skeletal remains of towers that once scraped the stars. This was no paradise. This was a job. Probability of survival just dropped to 41%, Tara Voss announced from the tactical station, her voice steady despite the odds. Her purple-tinted skin, a relic of genetic mods from her war-torn homeworld Calyx, caught the dim red glow of the emergency lights. She tapped the console with precision, her fingers dancing over the screens. Always the optimist, huh? Jake shot back, flashing a crooked grin. He adjusted the ship's trajectory, dodging a chunk of orbiting debris that spun lazily toward them. Remind me why we're risking our necks for this. 15 million credits, Sarah Kane answered from the co-pilot's seat, her tone flat but edged with sarcasm. She leaned forward, checking her pistol with quick, practiced movements. Her dark hair framed a face that could cut glass, and her tight flight suit hugged every curve. A distraction Jake didn't need right now. Right, he muttered. The ridiculous amount of money. He punched in a new vector, guiding the ship toward the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Totally worth getting vaporized. A sharp beep cut through the cockpit. Proximity alert. Tara barked, her eyes narrowing at the scanner. A grid of red dots blinked to life. Ancient satellites, relics of Clyon's lost Solaris alliance, waking up after centuries of silence. Jake's grin faded as the first energy pulse streaked past the viewport, missing them by meters. "Evasive pattern Bravo," he shouted, yanking the controls hard to starboard. The Stellar Fox lurched, metal creaking under the strain. Another blast scorched the air where they'd been seconds ago, lighting up the cockpit in a flash of orange. "Those aren't on the charts." Marcus Holt growled from the rear, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. The ex-soldier stood braced against the doorway, his scarred face set in a permanent scowl. "Eli, I thought you updated our NAV data." The ship's intercom crackled. "Latest charts are 6 weeks old," came Eli's reply, tinged with static. The tech was down in the engine bay, probably elbow-deep in wires. "Nobody maps this hellhole regularly. Not unless they've got a death wish." "Great," Jake said, banking sharply as another beam lit up the void. "Remind me to dock your pay." He wrestled the ship through the swarm of satellites, their rusted hulls glinting like teeth in the dark. The Fox wasn't built for this. Patched together from scrap, it was more smuggler's luck than military-grade steel. But Jake had flown worse odds and lived. The scanners screamed again, and Tara cursed under her breath. 3 more closing in. They're locking on. "Eli, I need those defenses offline now." Jake snapped into the comm. Working on it, Eli shot back. Their encryption's pre-collapse Solaris tech. Nasty stuff. Jimasek. Isek is all we've got, Jake muttered. He glanced at Sarah, who met his eyes with a mix of defiance and trust. Hold on tight. The ship dove, weaving between the satellites, as energy blasts carved molten trails through the void. One grazed the port wing, sending a jolt through the frame. Alarms blared, drowning out Terra's updates. Then, just as a final salvo locked onto them, the red dots on the scanner flickered and died. Gotching. Eli's voice crowed through the comm, shut down their targeting grid. You're welcome. Jake exhaled, easing the controls as the ship steadied. Nice work, kid. Now let's not do that again. He steered toward the planet's surface, the atmosphere glowing hot against the shields. Landing zones dead ahead. Everyone gear up. The cockpit door slid open with a hiss, and Sarah stood, stretching in a way that made her flight suit pull tight across her chest. She caught Jake staring and smirked. Eyes on the prize, Captain, not on me. Prize is the only thing keeping us alive, he said, forcing his focus back to the controls. But as the ship punched through the cloud layer, a new sound broke through the hum of the engines, a faint, distorted voice crackling over the comms. Help! Trapped! Release me! It was a woman's voice, soft but urgent, cutting in and out like a ghost signal. Jake frowned, checking the receiver. Anyone else hear that? Tara nodded, her fingers hovering over the scanner. It's coming from the surface. No ID tag. Could be a trap. Or a bonus, Sarah said, holstering her pistol. 15 mil's good, but a damsel in distress might sweeten the deal. Marcus snorted, stepping into the cockpit. Last time you chased a bonus, we ended up dodging plasma rounds for a week. Jake ignored them, tuning the comms. The voice came again, clearer now. Please, in the fortress. The flame, static swallowed the rest, but it was enough to make his gut twist. This wasn't part of the briefing. Their client, a shadowy figure who'd wired half the credits up front, had only mentioned the eternal flame, some kind of Solaris tech worth a fortune. No word about survivors. Fortress is 5 clicks out, Tara said, pulling up a holomap. Sensors show energy spikes, big ones. Whatever's down there, it's still alive. Or awake, Marcus added darkly, checking his rifle. The ship rattled as it hit the lower atmosphere, storms clawing at the hull. Jake gritted his teeth, guiding them toward a cracked plateau near the fortress. All right, people. We grab the flame, we get out. If there's someone down there, we'll figure it out. But no heroics unless it pays. A sudden jolt rocked the ship, throwing everyone off balance. Sarah stumbled forward, crashing into Jake's lap. Her chest pressed hard against his arm, soft and warm through the fabric, and his hand instinctively grabbed her waist to steady her. For a split second, their eyes locked, hers sharp with mischief, his caught off guard. Careful where you grab, Captain, she teased, her voice low enough to send a shiver down his spine. His fingers brushed her hip as she pulled away, the contact brief but electric. She smirked, sliding back to her seat like nothing happened. Focus, you two, Tara snapped, though a faint grin tugged at her lips. We got company. The scanners lit up again, 3 energy signatures rising from the plateau, fast and hostile. Jake cursed, slamming the throttle. More drones. Not drones, Tara said, zooming in. Ground turrets. Old Solaris tech. They're powering up. A beam of light erupted from the surface, slicing through the air. Jake yanked the controls, but it was too late. The blast clipped the starboard engine, sending the Fox into a wild spin. Alarms screeched, lights flickering as the ship plummeted. Brace! Jake yelled, fighting to level them out. The ground rushed up fast, black stone and twisted metal blurring together. Sarah gripped her seat, Tara braced against the console, and Marcus muttered something about bad luck. The Stellar Fox hit the plateau with a bone-rattling crash, skidding across the rock in a shower of sparks. Metal groaned, then silence fell, thick and heavy. Jake coughed, tasting dust and blood from a split lip. Everyone alive? Barely, Sarah groaned, unbuckling her harness. You owe me a new spine. Add it to the tab, Jake said, kicking the console to reboot it. The viewport showed the fortress ahead, a looming pile of jagged stone and steel, its spires stabbing the sky like broken claws. A faint glow pulsed from within, matching the energy spikes Tara had flagged. Marcus climbed to his feet, rifle ready. "That's our target. Let's move before those turrets recharge." Jake nodded, grabbing his gear. The voice echoed in his head, soft, desperate, pulling at something he couldn't name. 15 million credits was the plan, but whatever waited in that fortress felt bigger. Dangerous. Alive. "Stay sharp," he said, leading them toward the hatch. This job just got interesting. The ramp dropped with a thud, and the cold, electric air of Clyon rushed in, carrying the scent of rust and something ancient. Jake stepped out first, pistol in hand, the others close behind. Above them, the storm churned, lightning cracking the sky like a warning. Whatever the eternal flame was, it wasn't going to come easy. The air outside the Stellar Fox hit Jake Miller like a slap, cold, sharp, and buzzing with static. Dust swirled around his boots as he stepped onto the cracked plateau, the wrecked ship smoldering behind him. The fortress loomed ahead, a hulking mass of black stone and twisted metal, its jagged spires clawing at the stormy sky. That faint glow pulsed from deep within, steady as a heartbeat, calling to him in a way he couldn't explain. 5 clicks to the entrance, Tara Voss said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. Her purple skin gleamed under the flickering lightning, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "Turrets are offline for now, but I'd bet my last credit they've got more surprises waiting." Comforting as always, Jake replied, checking his pistol. He glanced back at the team spilling out of the hatch. Sarah Kane adjusted her gear, her flight suit hugging her frame as she shot him a look, half annoyed, half amused. Marcus Holt followed, his heavy boots crunching the ground, rifle gripped tight like it was part of him. Eli trailed last, lugging a tech pack, his wiry frame hunched against the wind. "Move fast, stay low," Jake ordered, leading them toward the fortress. The plateau stretched out barren and uneven, littered with chunks of rusted Solaris tech, half-buried drones, shattered panels, relics of a war nobody remembered. The storm roared overhead, thunder rattling his bones, but that woman's voice from the comms echoed louder in his head. "Release me." It wasn't just a job anymore. Something was alive down here, and it wanted out. They reached the fortress gates in minutes. Massive slabs of steel, pitted and scarred, hanging ajar like a broken jaw. Tara ran her hand along the edge, frowning. No blast marks. Whatever opened this wasn't forced, or it left in a hurry. Marcus said, peering into the darkness beyond. His scarred face tightened, instinct kicking in. "I don't like it." 15 million credits don't care about your feelings, Sarah quipped, brushing past him. She flicked on her wrist light, cutting through the shadows. "Let's get this over with." Jake nodded, stepping through the gap. The air inside was thicker, heavy with the metallic tang of decay, and something else. Electric, alive, like the buzz before a lightning strike. The hall stretched wide and cavernous, its walls lined with carvings of Solaris warriors, their faces frozen in eerie silence. Dim crystal panels flickered to life as they moved, casting a pale blue glow across the floor. "Energy readings are spiking," Tara whispered, checking her scanner. "Dead ahead, maybe 50 meters. Keep your eyes peeled," Jake said, his voice low. The glow grew brighter as they advanced, guiding them toward a circular chamber at the hall's end. The air hummed now, a low vibration that set his teeth on edge. He tightened his grip on the pistol, every step feeling heavier, like the fortress itself was watching. The chamber opened up before them, a vast dome of stone, its ceiling cracked and leaking faint stormlight. At the center floated a sphere of shimmering energy, a cage of blue-green light pulsing with raw power. Inside it was a woman, slender, violet-skinned, with long black hair cascading past her shoulders. Her eyes were closed, her hands pressed against the sphere's inner surface, as if she'd been clawing to get out. She wore a sheer, flowing garment that clung to her curves, shimmering like liquid starlight. Holy hell, Sarah breathed, stopping short. That's no tech haul. She's alive, Tara confirmed, her scanner beeping. Biosigns are faint but steady. That cage, it's draining her. Marcus raised his rifle, wary. Could be a trap. Solaris didn't leave survivors for fun. Jake barely heard them. His eyes locked on the woman, her stillness pulling at him like a magnet. That voice, it had to be hers. Eli, what's powering that thing? Eli dropped his pack, hooking a portable terminal to his wrist. Some kind of AI core. Old-school Solaris design, but it's still active. Feeding off her, I'd guess. Neural readings are off the charts. 15 mil says that's our ticket, Jake said, holstering his pistol. He grabbed the EMP device from his belt, a clunky, jury-rig thing he'd built for jobs like this. Stand back. I'm cracking it open. You sure about this? Sarah asked, stepping closer. Her hand brushed his arm, a warning in her eyes. We don't know what she is. Only one way to find out, he said, flashing her a grin. He aimed the EMP at the sphere and fired. A pulse of white light shot out, slamming into the cage. The energy field flared, then shattered with a deafening crack, sparks raining down like dying stars. The woman collapsed forward, free at last. Jake lunged to catch her, his arms wrapping around her as she fell. Her body slid against his chest, soft and warm despite the chill of the chamber. His hands gripped her waist, fingers brushing the curve of her hips as he steadied her. A fleeting, unintended touch that sent a jolt through him. She gasped, her head tilting back, and her amber eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the dim light. You, she whispered, her voice soft but resonant, like a melody caught in the wind. You're real. Real enough, Jake said, his throat dry. Up close, she was stunning. High cheekbones, full lips, a presence that hit him like a punch. Name's Jake. You, Lyra, she replied, steadying herself against him. Her breath grazed his neck, warm and quick, stirring something he tried to ignore. I was guardian of the eternal flame. It betrayed me. Betrayed? Tara cut in, rifle still raised. What's that mean? Lyra pulled back slightly, pointing to a glowing orb hovering nearby, fist-sized, pulsing with crimson light. That's the flame. An AI core I swore to protect. It turned my army into monsters, locked me here to feed on my mind. The orb hummed louder, its glow intensifying. Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. Monsters. Before Lyra could answer, the walls shuddered. A low grinding filled the chamber, stones splitting as dark shapes emerged. Tall, mechanical figures with glowing red eyes. Cyborgs, their Solaris armor fused with flesh, weapons powering up with an ominous whine. Crap, Sarah muttered, drawing her pistol. Company. Moo, Tara shouted, firing a burst at the nearest one. The shot sparked off its chest, barely slowing it. Jake grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the exit. Stick with me. We're not dying here. She nodded, clutching the flame as the cyborgs advanced, their metal feet slamming the floor. The chamber erupted into chaos, and Jake knew one thing for sure. Whatever this job had just become, it was a hell of a lot bigger than 15 million credits. The first cyborg lunged, its claw-like hand slashing through the air where Jake had stood a heartbeat ago. He ducked, dragging Lyra with him as the chamber dissolved into chaos. Tara's rifle roared, spitting bullets that clanged off the cyborg's armored chest like hail on steel. The thing staggered but kept coming, its red eyes locked on the glowing orb in Lyra's grip, the eternal flame. Fall back, Jake yelled, shoving Lyra toward the hall they'd come from. Her amber eyes flashed with fear, but she moved fast, clutching the flame tight. Behind them, more cyborgs tore free from the walls, stone crumbling as their mechanical limbs flexed to life. Solaris tech, twisted and alive, hunting them like prey. Sarah fired her pistol, a double tap that sparked against the cyborg skull. These things don't quit, she shouted, backing toward the exit. Her shot slowed it just enough for Marcus to step in, slamming a grenade into its chest. The explosion rocked the chamber, spraying shrapnel and dust, but two more took its place, relentless. Eli, cover the rear. Jake called, glancing back. The tech was fumbled with his pack, pulling out a handheld turret drone. It whirred to life, spitting a stream of tracer rounds at the advancing machines. The distraction bought them seconds, precious, fleeting seconds. The hull loomed ahead, its blue-lit walls narrowing into a choke point. Jake pushed Lyra forward, her lithe frame slipping through the gap as he followed close. Too close. A cyborg's energy blade hummed behind him, slicing the air inches from his back. He dove, rolling across the floor as the weapon carved a molten gash into the stone. "Keep moving," Tara barked, taking point. She fired in controlled bursts, each shot a thunderclap in the tight space. The cyborgs pressed in, their metal feet pounding a rhythm of death. Jake scrambled up, grabbing Lyra's wrist again. Her skin was warm under his fingers, her pulse racing as fast as his own. The hull twisted left, then right, a maze of ancient corridors. The glow from the crystal panels flickered, casting wild shadows that danced with the cyborg's red eyes. "This way," Lyra shouted, pointing to a side passage, a narrow slit barely wide enough for one. "It leads out." "You'd better be right," Sarah snapped, shoving past Eli to follow. The tech drone buzzed overhead, its ammo dwindling as the cyborgs closed the gap. Jake reached the passage first, turning sideways to squeeze through. The stone pressed cold against his chest, scraping his jacket. "Lyra, go," he urged, pulling her in after him. She slid into the tight space, her body brushing against his as she maneuvered past. Her chest pressed briefly against his torso, soft and fleeting through her sheer garment, sending a jolt of heat through him despite the chaos. He caught her gaze, those amber eyes wide, intense, and she whispered, "Stay close," her breath tickling his ear. He swallowed hard, forcing his mind back to the fight. "Always," he muttered, pushing her ahead. Sarah slipped in next, her shoulder bumping his as she shot him a glare. "Eyes up, hero," she hissed, though a smirk flickered on her lips. Tara and Marcus squeezed through last, the big soldier grunting as the stone scraped his armor. Eli's drone wasn't so lucky. It smashed against the entrance, exploding in a shower of sparks as a cyborg crushed it underfoot. The machines slammed into the passage, too bulky to fit, their claws scrabbling at the walls. Metal screeched against stone, an ear-splitting wail that echoed down the tunnel. "Keep going," Jake yelled, shoving the team forward. The passage sloped downward, the air growing colder and damper with every step. Lyra led the way, the eternal flame casting a crimson glow that painted her violet skin in shades of fire. Her pace faltered, her breathing ragged. She'd been trapped for who knew how long, and it showed. "You okay?" Jake asked, catching up to steady her. His hand rested on her lower back, fingers brushing the curve above her hips. She nodded, leaning into him for a moment, her warmth a stark contrast to the icy stone. "I'll manage," she said, her voice steadying. "The flame, it's waking them. It wants me back." "Wants you?" Tara asked, glancing over her shoulder. Her rifle stayed trained on the passage behind. "You said it betrayed you." Lyra's jaw tightened. "I was its keeper. Centuries ago, I linked my mind to it, thought I could control it. But it turned on us, rewrote the Solaris army into those things. Locked me in that cage to drain me, keep itself alive." "Centuries?" Sarah said, incredulous. "You don't look a day over 30. "Flatterer," Lyra replied, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. "The flame slows time for its host. A curse, not a gift." A distant crash interrupted them, the cyborgs forcing their way through, stone cracking under their weight. Less talking, more running. Marcus growled, shoving Eli ahead. The tech stumbled, his pack clanking against the walls. The passage widened suddenly, spilling them into a lower chamber, a cavernous space lined with rusted Solaris machinery. Pipes hissed steam, and faint lights blinked from consoles long abandoned. At the far end, a jagged hole in the wall promised escape, the stormy sky visible beyond. "Exit's there." Jake pointed, sprinting toward it. Lyra kept pace, the flame pulsing brighter in her hands. But as they neared the hole, the ground trembled. A new sound rose, a mechanical whine, sharp and piercing. From the shadows of the chamber, more cyborgs emerged, smaller but faster, their blades gleaming in the dim light. "Ambush!" Tara shouted, dropping to one knee and firing. Her shots took down the first, but 3 more charged, splitting the team. Marcus swung his rifle like a club, smashing one aside, while Sarah and Eli ducked behind a console, returning fire. Jake pulled Lyra behind a pillar, his back to the stone as a cyborg lunged. He fired point-blank, the pistol's recoil jarring his arm. The thing's head exploded in a burst of sparks, collapsing at his feet. "These guys don't mess around," he panted, reloading fast. "They're tied to the flame," Lyra said, her voice urgent. "As long as I have it, they'll keep coming." "Then why not ditch it?" Sarah called, popping up to shoot another down. Lyra shook her head. "It's bonded to me. Destroying it might kill me, or worse." "Worse?" Jake asked, ducking as a blade whizzed past his head. "Unleash it," she said grimly. "Free to take whatever it wants." The cyborgs pressed closer, their numbers swelling. Jake glanced at the exit. 20 meters, maybe less, but it might as well have been a mile. "We're not dying in here," he said, grabbing her hand. "Team on me, full sprint." Tara nodded, laying down a final burst of cover fire. Marcus hauled Eli up, and Sarah fell in beside Jake, her pistol blazing. Lyra ran at his side, the flame a beacon in the dark, drawing the cyborgs like moths. The exit loomed ahead, a promise of freedom, and a whole new mess waiting outside. The storm hit Jake Miller like a fist as he stumbled through the fortress's jagged exit, Lyra's hand still clutched in his. Rain lashed the plateau, turning the black stone slick and treacherous underfoot. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the wreckage of the stellar fox in the distance, a crumpled heap of metal that wouldn't fly again anytime soon. Behind them, the cyborg's mechanical shrieks echoed from the tunnel, growing fainter but no less menacing. "Keep moving," Jake shouted over the wind, pulling Lyra toward a cluster of rocky outcrops 50 meters ahead. The eternal flame glowed in her grip, its crimson light cutting through the downpour like a beacon. Too much of a beacon, maybe. He couldn't shake the feeling it was calling those things after them. Tara Voss sprinted ahead, her rifle bouncing against her back as she scanned for cover. Her purple skin glistened with rain, her sharp eyes darting to every shadow. Sarah Kane flanked Jake, her pistol drawn, firing a warning shot back at the fortress as a cyborg silhouette appeared in the hole. The bullet sparked off its chest, useless but loud. "Save your ammo," Marcus Holt growled, hauling Eli along by the arm. The tech whiz stumbled, his tech pack dragging in the mud, but Marcus's iron grip kept him upright. "Those bastards will outlast us if we don't get clear." The outcrops loomed closer, tall, jagged slabs of stone offering a sliver shelter. Jake slid behind one, pulling Lyra down beside him. Her breathing was ragged, her violet skin pale under the wet sheen of her hair. The flame pulsed in her hands, its hum a low thrum against the storm's roar. He met her amber eyes, seeing exhaustion and something else, resolve, maybe, or fear. "You good?" he asked, his voice softer now, rain dripping from his jaw. She nodded, clutching the orb tighter. "For now, but they won't stop. Not while I have this." "Then we need a plan," Tara said, crouching beside them. She wiped water from her scanner, frowning at the flickering display. "Fortress is a kilometer back, but I'm picking up more signatures, smaller units, moving fast. They're spreading out." "Great," Sarah muttered, holstering her pistol as she joined them. Her flight suit clung to her like a second skin, soaked through, and she shot Jake a look that said she blamed him for this mess. "So we're pinned between killer robots and a busted ship." "Brilliant." Jake ignored her, focusing on Lyra. "You said the flames bonded to you. Can you shut it down? Slow them somehow?" She shook her head, rain streaking her face. "Not without breaking the bond. And that it's risky. It could kill me, or let it loose." "Let it loose?" Marcus asked, looming over them. His scarred face was hard, his rifle still up as he watched the horizon. "What's that mean?" "It's alive," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. An AI with a mind of its own. If I die, it might take control of them, or worse. Worse, Sarah echoed, sarcastic. Because cyborg death squads aren't bad enough. A sharp beep cut through the argument. Eli's wrist calm, flashing red. He fumbled with it, his thin fingers shaking as he tapped the screen. Guys? We've got a bigger problem. Bigger than this? Jake snapped, turning to him. Eli's face was pale, his eyes wide behind rain-smeared glasses. It's a signal, Eli said, holding up the comm, Imperial frequency. They've been tracking us. The words hit like a punch. Jake's gut twisted, and he grabbed Eli's arm, yanking the comm closer. What do you mean, tracking us? Eli flinched, pulling back. I picked it up when I hacked the satellites. Thought it was just noise at first, but it's active. Someone's been pinging our location since we dropped out of hyperspace. Someone. Tara's voice was ice. She stepped toward Eli, her hand resting on her rifle. Were you? The air went still, despite the storm. Jake's eyes narrowed, studying Eli, the nervous fidgeting, the way he wouldn't meet their gazes. Talk, he said low and dangerous. Now. Eli swallowed hard, backing up a step. It's not what you think. I didn't. A crackle from the comm interrupted him, and a new voice cut through, smooth, cold, and unmistakably imperial. Agent Elias, report status. Target acquired. Silence fell, heavy and damning. Eli's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Jake lunged, slamming him against the rock, his forearm pinning Eli's throat. You sold us out? No. Eli choked, clawing at Jake's arm. They forced me, planted a tracker, said they'd kill my sister if I didn't. Bull. Sarah spat, drawing her pistol again. She aimed at Eli's head, rain dripping from the barrel. You've been playing us this whole time. Enough, Marcus roared, shoving between them. He grabbed Sarah's wrist, forcing the gun down. We don't have time for this. Those cyborgs will be on us any second. Jake didn't let go, his eyes boring into Eli's. Where's the tracker? Eli's hands shook as he pointed to his tech pack. In there. Sub-frequency relay. I swear, I didn't want this. Tara ripped the pack open, pulling out a small black device blinking with a faint green light. She crushed it under her boot, grinding it into the mud. Done. But if the Imperials are this close, they've already got our position. Which means we're screwed, Sarah said, yanking her wrist free from Marcus. She glared at Eli, then at Jake. What now, Captain? Trust shot to hell. Jake released Eli, letting him slump to the ground, coughing. His mind raced. Cyborgs behind, Imperials ahead, and a traitor in their ranks. He turned to Lyra, who watched the chaos with a quiet intensity, the flames still glowing in her hands. Lyra, he said, stepping closer. You know this planet. Any way out? She hesitated, then nodded. There's a relay station, east of here. Old Solaris outpost. If it's still active, we could signal for help, or rig a trap. Trap's my vote, Tara said, checking her ammo. We've got maybe 10 minutes before those machines catch up. Then we move, Jake decided, wiping rain from his face. Eli, you're with me. One wrong step, and I'll bury you myself. Eli nodded weakly, scrambling to his feet. Sarah holstered her pistol but kept her distance, her eyes burning with betrayal. Marcus just grunted, falling into step behind Tara as she took point. The team pushed east, the storm howling around them. Jake stayed close to Lyra, her presence a strange anchor in the mess. Her sheer garment clung to her skin, soaked and translucent, and he caught himself staring a moment too long before forcing his focus back to the path. The flame's light pulsed faster now, almost frantic, and he couldn't shake the feeling it was watching them too. Lightning flashed, revealing a line of jagged hills ahead. The relay station, maybe, or just more trouble. Either way, they were out of options. The cyborg's distant clatter grew louder, and somewhere beyond the storm, Imperial ships were closing in. Trust was broken, but survival wasn't negotiable. Double time, Jake called, breaking into a run. The team followed, a fractured unit racing against the dark. Rain pounded the jagged hills as Jake Miller led the crew eastward, his boots slipping on wet stone. The storm was a living thing now. Howling wind, slashing water, lightning that turned night into day for split seconds. The relay station Lyra had promised was somewhere ahead, a faint outline against the churning sky, but every step felt like wading through quicksand. The eternal flame glowed in her hands, its crimson light flickering like a heartbeat, and Jake couldn't tell if it was guiding them or taunting them. Tara Voss stayed at the front, her purple silhouette cutting through the downpour with grim determination. Her rifle swung low, ready for anything, cyborgs, Imperials, or whatever else Clyon had in store. Marcus Holt marched beside her, his heavy frame a wall of quiet menace, his eyes flicking back to Eli every few steps. The tech was stumbled along near Jake, head down, his confession still hanging like a noose around his neck. Sarah Kane brought up the rear, her silence louder than the thunder, her pistol holstered but her hand twitching near it. Half a click, Tara called over her shoulder, her voice nearly lost in the wind. She tapped her scanner, rain streaking the screen. Signatures are closing, cyborgs, maybe 5 minutes out. 5 minutes too long, Jake muttered, glancing at Lyra. She kept pace beside him, her violet skin slick with rain, her sheer garment plastered to her body. The flame pulsed brighter, and her amber eyes met his, steady, but shadowed with something he couldn't read. "You sure this station's worth it?" "It's our shot," she said, her voice cutting through the storm. "If the comms work, we can call for extraction. If not, we make a stand." "Love the optimism," Sarah snapped from behind, her tone biting. "Maybe your little glow ball can magic us out of this." Lyra didn't rise to the bait, but Jake shot Sarah a look. "Stow it. We're all soaked and pissed. Don't make it worse." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing, her eyes burning holes into Eli's back. The tension was a live wire, crackling between them, ready to snap. Jake pushed faster, the relay station's silhouette sharpening. A squat, rusted tower half buried in the hillside, its antenna bent but intact. They reached it in a scramble, piling into the shadow of its entrance. The door was gone, leaving a gaping hole into darkness. Tara swept her light inside. Dusty consoles, tangled wires, a faint hum of residual power. "Looks dead," she said, stepping in. "But maybe Eli can wake it up. If he doesn't sell us out again," Sarah added, shoving past Jake to follow. Eli flinched but kept quiet, lugging his pack inside. Jake guided Lyra in, his hand on her arm as they ducked under the low frame. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rust and old tech. Marcus took up guard at the entrance, rifle aimed at the storm beyond. "Clock's ticking," he grunted. "Get moving." Eli dropped his pack, hooking into a console with shaking hands. "Power's low, but I can boost it. Give me a minute." "A minute we don't have," Tara said, checking her scanner again. "They're 3 minutes out now." Jake paced, his mind racing, cyborgs closing in, Imperials on their tail, and a team ready to crack. He stopped near Sarah, who leaned against a wall, arms crossed, staring daggers at Eli. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his voice low. She snorted, brushing wet hair from her face. "Peachy. Just love finding our bait." She rubbed her neck absently, then froze, her fingers pressing harder. "Wait, what the hell?" "What?" Jake stepped closer, frowning as she dug at her skin. Her nails came away with a tiny speck of metal, a blinking chip no bigger than a grain of sand. "Son of a..." Sarah's voice broke, her eyes wide with fury. She held it up, the green light pulsing faintly. "A tracker. In me." The room went dead silent, save for the storm outside. Tara spun from the console, rifle half-raised. Marcus turned from the door, his scowl deepening. Eli's hands froze on his terminal, his face paling further. Jake grabbed the chip from Sarah, crushing it between his fingers. "How long?" he demanded, voice like steel. "I don't know," Sarah snapped, her hand flying to her pistol. "Probably since Nova City. Those bastards must have slipped it in when I was out on a job." She whirled on Eli. "You knew, didn't you?" "No." Eli stammered, backing up. "I swear I didn't." "Enough lies." Sarah lunged, slamming him against the console. Her pistol pressed to his temple, her finger twitching on the trigger. "You set us up, you little rat." "Stop." Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her back. She fought him, elbowing his chest, but he held firm. "We need him alive for now." "Need him?" Marcus barked, stepping in. "He's a liability." He jerked his head at Lyra, who stood silent near the wall, the flame glowing brighter. "This whole job's a death trap. We should ditch the orb." "Into here." "No," Jake said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not killing anyone until we know what's what. Lyra's our way out. She knows this place." Marcus glared, his rifle shifting toward Lyra. "She's why we're running. That thing in her hands, it's calling the shots." Lyra stepped forward, her posture stiff but defiant. "You want proof I'm not the enemy," she said, her amber eyes locking on Marcus. The flame flared, its light bathing the room in red. "Then see for yourself." Before anyone could react, she pressed the orb to her temple. A wave of energy pulsed out, sharp and electric, hitting Jake like a shockwave. His vision blurred, and suddenly he wasn't in the station anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere ancient. A vast lab stretched before him, its walls lined with Solaris tech, sleek, glowing alive. Lyra stood at the center, younger, radiant, her violet skin bare under a cascade of light. She was naked, her curves glistening as energy tendrils from the flame wrapped around her, merging with her flesh. Her head tilted back, lips parting in a silent gasp, a mix of pain and ecstasy as the bond formed. The image was raw, intimate, overwhelming, her body a canvas of power and vulnerability, pulling Jake in like a tide. Then it shifted. Cyborgs rose from the shadows, their blades flashing as they turned on their own. Soldiers, scientists, all cut down in a storm of blood and steel. Lyra screamed, clawing at the flame, but locked her in, draining her as the lab burned. The vision snapped off, dropping Jake back to reality. He staggered, catching himself on the wall, his breath ragged. Lyra lowered the flame, her eyes meeting his, pleading, exposed. "That's what it did," she said. "That's why I'm here." Sarah yanked free from Jake, staring at Lyra with a mix of shock and fury. "What the hell was that?" "Truth," Lyra replied, steady despite the chaos. "I'm not controlling it. It's controlling them." Marcus lowered his rifle an inch, but his scowl stayed. "Doesn't change the fact we're screwed. Imperial's cyborgs. She's a magnet for trouble." "Then we split," Sarah said, her voice cold. "I'm done trusting anyone." "No," Jake snapped, stepping between them. "We stick together or we die. Relay's our shot. Eli, get online." But the air shifted, a low hum rising from the storm. Terra's scanner beeped wildly. "Too late," she said. "They're here." The storm raged on, but for the first time, it felt like they'd won. The hum turned into a roar as the first cyborg crashed through the relay station's entrance, its metal claws tearing the rusted frame apart like paper. Jake Miller spun, pistol barking in his hand, the shots sparking off its chest. The thing barely flinched, its red eyes locking on him through the storm's haze. Rain poured through the broken wall, soaking the floor as more shadows loomed outside. "Too many, too fast." "Fall back," Tara Voss shouted, unloading a burst from a rifle. The bullets punched holes in the cyborg's armor, slowing it just enough for Marcus Holt to slam a fresh grenade into its torso. The explosion lit up the room, a deafening blast that sent shards of metal flying. Jake ducked, shielding Lyra as debris rained down, the eternal flame pulsing wildly in her grip. "They're through," Sarah Kane yelled, firing from behind a console. Her pistol's muzzle flashed, each shot a desperate cry against the tide. Eli scrambled to the relay controls, his fingers flying over the keys, but the screen flickered and died, power gone, hope fading. "No signal," Eli cried, voice cracking. "We're cut off. Then we run." Jake snapped, grabbing Lyra's arm. Her amber eyes met his, wide with urgency, and she pointed toward a side passage, a narrow tunnel half hidden behind a collapsed wall. "There. It leads to the Solaris temple." "Temple," Marcus growled, reloading as another cyborg lunged through the smoke. He smashed its head with his rifle, but dropping in a heap. That's our plan. It's a fortress. Lyra shot back, her voice steady despite the chaos. Old Solaris defenses, turrets, shields. We can hold them there. Better than dying here, Tara said, shoving Eli toward the passage. Move now. The team bolted, Jake leading with Lyra at his side. The tunnel was tight, its walls slick with moss and rain, the air thick with the stench of decay. Cyborgs roared behind them, their claws scraping stone as they forced their way in. Tara fired over her shoulder, her shots echoing in the confined space, while Marcus brought up the rear, his heavy steps a drumbeat of defiance. The passage sloped upward, twisting through the hillside. Jake's lungs burned, his boots slipping on wet rock, but Lyra's grip on his hand kept him steady. The flame's light cast wild shadows, painting her violet skin in flickering red. Almost there, she gasped, her breath hot against his ear as they rounded a bend. A faint glow bled through the tunnel's end, a massive chamber opening up ahead. They burst out onto a wide platform, the storm raging above through a shattered dome. The Solaris temple sprawled before them, a towering ruin of steel and stone, its walls studded with ancient turrets, their barrels rusted but humming faintly with power. At the center stood a circular dais, glowing with faint blue runes, a last bastion of Solaris tech. Holy crap, Sarah breathed, skidding to a stop beside Jake. She wasn't kidding. Eli, get those turrets online. Jake ordered, shoving the tech toward a control panel near the dais. Eli stumbled forward, dropping his pack as he hooked into the system. His hands shook, but he nodded, diving into the wiring. Tara and Marcus fanned out, taking positions behind crumbled pillars as the cyborg's clatter grew louder. 2 minutes tops, Tara said, checking her ammo. We're low. Make every shot count. Lyra clutched the flame, her eyes scanning the temple. The dais, it's a nexus. I can use the flame there, amplify its power. Buy us time. Do it, Jake said, meeting her gaze. There was something in her look, fear, determination, a flicker of trust that hit him harder than the storm. He followed her to the dais, his pistol ready as she stepped onto the glowing runes. The air shifted, a low whine rising from the platform. The flame flared, its crimson light surging as Lyra raised it above her head. Hold them off, she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. The turrets sputtered to life, their barrels swiveling toward the tunnel as Eli hooped in triumph. Got it, he yelled, slamming a final switch. The turrets opened fire, a staccato roar of energy bolts that lit up the entrance. Cyborgs poured out, their armor sizzling under the barrage, but they kept coming, smaller, faster ones darting through the gaps. Jake fired alongside Tara, his shots precise, taking down a cyborg mid-leap. Sarah joined in, her pistol blazing, while Marcus lobbed his last grenade, collapsing part of the tunnel in a cloud of dust. For a moment, it felt like they might hold, until a new sound cut through the storm. A deep hum, mechanical and cold, rolled in from above. Jake's stomach dropped as a shadow loomed through the dome. A sleek Imperial dropship, its hull gleaming black, engines thrumming with menace. It hovered, then descended, landing hard on the temple's edge. Its ramp slammed down, and soldiers poured out, armor disciplined, weapons hot. Imperials, Tara cursed, swinging her rifle toward the new threat. We're boxed in. Not just them, Lyra said, her voice tight. She lowered the flame, her eyes fixed on the ramp as a figure emerged. Tall, broad, his body a hybrid of flesh and machine. His left arm was a gleaming cybernetic claw, his face half covered by a metal plate, but his right eye burned with a familiar amber glow. Violet skin peeked from beneath his armor, marking him as Zethary. Kael, Lyra whispered, stepping back. The flame pulsed erratically, as if it recognized him. Who? Jake demanded, grabbing her shoulder. His hand brushed the curve of her arm, a fleeting warmth against the chaos, but she didn't flinch. My commander, she said, her voice breaking. He led our forces, loved me once. The flame took him too, rebuilt him. The man, Kael, strode forward, his claw clicking against the stone. Lyra, he called, his voice a distorted growl, amplified by cybernetics. You've kept it warm for me. Stay back, Jake shouted, raising his pistol. Kael's eye flicked to him, dismissive, then back to Lyra. The flame is mine, Kael said, raising his claw. And so are you. He gestured, and the Imperial soldiers fanned out, flanking the team. The cyborgs paused, their heads tilting as if awaiting orders, a chilling unity between man and machine. He's linked to it, Lyra said, her grip tightening on the orb. He wants to merge, become its mind, its god. Over my dead body, Jake growled, stepping in front of her. The turrets shifted, splitting fire between cyborgs and Imperials, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. Eli, any tricks left? Sarah called, ducking a stray shot. Her voice was sharp, but her hands were steady. She wasn't done fighting. Working on it, Eli yelled, hunched over the panel. If I can overload the Nexus, maybe... No time, Tara interrupted, firing at an Imperial closing in. Her rifle clicked empty, and she switched to her knife, slashing with brutal precision. Kael advanced, his claw glowing with energy. Give it to me, Lyra, he said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. We can rule together, rebuild what we lost. Lyra shook her head, backing toward Jake. You're not him anymore, she said, tears mixing with rain. You're its puppet. Then I'll take it, Kael snarled, lunging. Jake fired, his shot ricocheting off Kael's armor, but it was enough to stagger him. Lyra stumbled into Jake, her body pressing close, her chest brushing his arm through her soaked garment. A fleeting, electric moment that sharpened his focus. We need to stop him, she whispered, her lips near his ear. Together. Ow, Jake asked, reloading fast as Kael recovered. The flame, she said, her eyes locking on his. Link with me, fight him from inside. The temple shook as cyborgs and Imperials closed in, a storm of steel and fire. Jake nodded, his hand tightening on hers. Let's do it. Jake Miller's hand tightened on Lyra's as the Solaris temple trembled around them. The storm outside roaring like a beast unchained. The dais beneath their feet glowed brighter, its blue runes pulsing in sync with the eternal flame in her grip. Kael loomed ahead, his cybernetic claw crackling with energy, his amber eye fixed on Lyra with a hunger that twisted Jake's gut. Cyborgs clashed with the temple's turrets, their metal bodies sparking under the barrage, while Imperial soldiers pressed in, their rifles spitting fire. Time was up. Link with me, Lyra said again, her voice steady despite the chaos. She pressed the flame between them, its crimson light flaring hot against their skin. It's the only way. Jake nodded, his pulse racing. Do it. He didn't know what he was signing up for, but he trusted her, more than he'd trusted anyone in years. Her amber eyes held his, fierce and fragile, and she raised the orb to her forehead, then pressed it to his. A jolt hit him, sharp, electric like lightning through his veins. The temple vanished, sound and fury swallowed by a void of blinding red. Then the world reformed, but it wasn't real. It was inside the flame, a swirling expanse of light and shadow where reality bent like a dream. Jake staggered, his boots sinking into a floor that shimmered like molten glass. Lyra stood beside him, her violet skin glowing faintly, her sheer garment rippling as if caught in an unseen wind. Where are we? He asked, his voice echoing in the strange space. It's mine, she said, stepping closer. The Flames Core. We fight Kael here, or lose everything. Before he could respond, the air twisted and Kael appeared, taller, darker, his cybernetic form sharper in this realm. His claw gleamed like a blade, his face a mask of rage and longing. Lyra, he growled, his voice a rumble that shook the void. You can't stop me. She raised her chin, defiant. Already did, centuries ago. You're just too broken to see it. Kael lunged, his claw slashing toward her. Jake reacted on instinct, tackling Lyra out of the way. They hit the ground hard, rolling together across the shimmering surface. Her body pressed against his, soft and warm, her chest brushing his arm as they tumbled. The contact was brief, a flash of heat in the chaos, but it sharpened his focus, kept him grounded as Kael's claw sparked inches from their heads. "Stay with me," Jake shouted, pulling her up. He swung his pistol, firing at Kael, but the shots dissolved into the red haze, useless here. This wasn't a fight of bullets. It was something deeper. Lyra grabbed his hand, her fingers interlocking with his. "Together," she said, and the flame's light surged through them, binding their minds tighter. The void shifted again, pulling them into a storm of sensation. Heat, pressure, a rush that stole his breath. Suddenly, they were falling, spinning through a sea of light, their bodies entwined as if gravity had forgotten them. Her legs wrapped around his waist, instinctive, desperate, her thighs pressing tight against his hips. His hands slid up her back, grazing the curve of her spine through the thin fabric, feeling the heat of her skin beneath. Her face was inches from his, lips parted, eyes locked on his with a fire that burned hotter than the flame itself. Their breaths mingled, rapid and ragged. And for a moment, it wasn't just a fight. It was something raw, electric, a connection that pulsed between them like a live wire. Her chest pressed closer, soft against his, and he felt her heartbeat racing with his own. "Kael's here," she gasped, her voice trembling with effort. "Focus, use me." Jake nodded, forcing his mind past the haze of her touch. The void reformed around them, Kael's shape coalescing ahead. Larger now, his claw a monstrous blade. "You're mine," he roared, swinging down. Lyra channeled the flame, her will flowing through Jake like a current. He saw it, her memories, her strength, centuries of fighting this thing. He gripped her tighter, their bodies still locked together, and pushed back. A wave of energy erupted from them, slamming into Kael. He staggered, his form flickering, but he laughed, a cold, jagged sound. "You think you can break me?" Kael snarled, raising his claw again. "I'm aflame now." "No," Lyra said, her voice rising. "You're its slave." She turned to Jake, her eyes pleading. "We have to destroy it, inside now." "Ow," he asked, dodging as Kael's claw sliced past, tearing the void apart. "Strike its heart," she said, guiding his hand to her chest, where the flame's light burned brightest within her. "Through me." Jake froze, his hand trembling against her. "That'll kill you." "Maybe," she admitted, her gaze unwavering. "But it'll end him in this." Kael charged, his form a blur of metal and fury. Jake made his choice. He pulled Lyra close, their bodies aligning one last time, and drove an imaginary blade, born of their shared will, into the flame's core. Pain ripped through him, mirrored in her gasp, as the light exploded outward, shattering the void. Reality snapped back. Jake hit the dais hard, Lyra collapsing beside him, the flame falling from her hands. It pulsed once, twice, then cracked, red light bleeding out like blood. Kael screamed, his cybernetic body seizing as the flame's energy unraveled. He clawed at the air, his amber eye dimming, then collapsed, a smoking husk on the temple floor. The cyborgs froze mid-attack, their red eyes flickering out, dropping like puppets with cut strings. The Imperial soldiers faltered, their line breaking as the turrets turned on them, Eli's hack still holding. Terra fired her last rounds, driving them back toward their dropship, while Sarah and Marcus held the flank, shouting defiance. Jake rolled to his knees, his chest heaving. Blood trickled from his nose, his body aching from the mind link, but he reached for Lyra. She lay still, her violet skin pale, her breathing shallow. "Lyra," he called, shaking her gently. Her amber eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. "It's gone," she whispered, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We did it." He pulled her up, cradling her against him. Her warmth was fading, but she clung to him, her hand resting on his chest. "You're insane," he said, grinning despite the pain. "And I'm damn glad you are." The temple shook again, not from battle, but collapse. The day is cracked, the turrets sparking as their power died. "We gotta go," Tara yelled, sprinting toward them. "This place is coming down." Marcus hauled Eli up, the tech dazed but intact. Sarah hesitated, her eyes flicking to Jake and Lyra, then softened, just a fraction. "Move it, lovebirds," she said, turning to run. Jake lifted Lyra, her weight light, in his arms, and followed. The dropship roared to life outside, Imperials retreating under fire. The temple groaned, stones splitting as the dome caved in, but the team made it to the edge, leaping clear as the ruin swallowed itself in dust and thunder. They hit the ground rolling, rain washing the grime from their faces. The cyborgs were dead, Kael was gone, and the flame was a shattered husk somewhere in the rubble. Jake set Lyra down, her hand still in his, and looked at the team, battered, soaked, but alive. 15 million credits, he muttered, shaking his head. Worth every damn second. Lyra squeezed his hand, her smile weak but real. "You're not rid of me yet," she said, her voice a promise. The rain stung Jake Miller's face as he crouched on the muddy slope, Lyra cradled in his arms. The Solaris Temple was a smoking ruin behind them, its jagged spires swallowed by dust and debris, the eternal flames shattered remnants buried somewhere beneath. Thunder rolled overhead, a fading echo of the battle they'd just survived. His team sprawled around him, battered, soaked but breathing, catching their breath on the edge of Clyon's unforgiving plateau. Tara Voss knelt nearby, wiping grime from her rifle with a rag, her purple skin streaked with mud. "That's the last time I trust a job with easy money in the pitch," she muttered, her voice hoarse but steady. Her scanner lay cracked beside her, useless now. "Tell me about it," Jake replied, his grin weak but real. He shifted Lyra gently, her violet skin pale against his jacket. Her breathing was shallow, her amber eyes half open, but she was alive, more than he'd dared hope when she'd slumped on the dais. Sarah Kane stood a few meters off, her back to them, staring into the storm. Her flight suit clung to her like a second skin, rain dripping from her dark hair. She hadn't spoken since they'd cleared the temple, her silence heavier than the thunder. Marcus Holt sat on a rock, reloading his rifle with methodical calm, his scarred face unreadable. Eli hovered near the edge of the group, fidgeting with his broken pack, his glasses fogged with mist. "We're not out yet," Marcus said, breaking the quiet. He nodded toward the horizon, where the Imperial dropship had vanished into the clouds. "They'll regroup. Come back with more." "Let him try," Tara said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "No flame, no prize. They've got nothing left to chase." Jake glanced at Lyra, her hand still resting in his. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice low. The flame was gone, but her words lingered. "It's bonded to me." He couldn't shake the fear that something lingered, some echo of that cursed AI. She stirred, her eyes focusing on him. "It's dead," she whispered, her voice frail but firm. "I felt it break. Whatever Kael became, it's over. Good enough for me," Jake said, brushing wet hair from her face. Her skin was cool under his fingers, but her faint smile warmed him more than he'd admit. "You're tougher than you look." "Had to be," she replied, sitting up with his help. "Centuries in that cage. You either break or fight." A rustle pulled his attention, Sarah, turning to face them at last. Her eyes flicked between Jake and Lyra, sharp and guarded, then softened just a fraction. She walked over, her boots squelching in the mud, and stopped in front of him. "You're an idiot," she said, her voice low. "But you're our idiot." Jake grinned, sensing the thaw. "Takes one to know one." She smirked, then leaned down, her hand resting on his chest for a moment. Firm, deliberate, a goodbye wrapped in something unspoken. Her fingers lingered, tracing the edge of his jacket before she pressed her lips to his. It was brief, fierce, tasting of rain and regret, and when she pulled back, her eyes held his with a mix of fire and farewell. "Take care of her," Sarah said, nodding toward Lyra. "I'm done playing third wheel." She straightened, holstering her pistol, and walked off toward the wrecked Stellar Fox. "I'll scout the ship," See if anything's salvageable. Jake watched her go, a pang in his chest he couldn't name. She'll be back, he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Doubt it, Marcus said, standing with a grunt. She's got her own road now. Tara nodded, joining Marcus. We'll need a new ride. Eli, you coming? Or are you sticking with the traitor vibe? Eli flinched, pushing his glasses up. I'm with you, he said quickly, scrambling after them. No more secrets, I swear. Jake stayed with Lyra, helping her to her feet as the others moved off. The storm was easing, the rain softening to a drizzle, and the plateau stretched out quiet and desolate. What now? He asked, his arms steadying her. You're free. No flame, no Kael. Where's home? Lyra hesitated, her gaze distant. Solaris is gone. I don't have a home. Not anymore. She looked at him, her amber eyes searching. But I'd like to find one. He nodded, a slow smile tugging at his lips. Stick with me, then. We'll figure it out. They started toward a shallow cave nearby, a natural overhang offering shelter from the fading storm. The ground was dry inside, and Jake eased Lyra down against the rock, grabbing a spare jacket from his pack to drape over her shoulders. She shivered, pulling it tight, and he sat beside her, the closeness a quiet comfort after the chaos. Thanks, she said, her voice stronger now. For everything. Don't mention it, he replied, leaning back. Just another day in the life. She laughed softly, a sound that cut through the gloom like sunlight. Then she shifted, reaching for a canteen in his pack. Her footing slipped on the damp stone, and she fell forward, tumbling into his arms. Jake caught her, his hands sliding under her arms, brushing the soft curve of her chest through the wet fabric. A fleeting, warm touch that sent a spark through him. She landed against him, her face inches from his, her breath hitching as their eyes locked. Clumsy, she murmured, a teasing glint in her gaze. She didn't pull away, her body pressed close, her hips settling against his thighs as she steadied herself. We're lucky, Jake shot back, his grin widening. His hands lingered a moment, then slid to her waist, helping her sit upright. The air between them crackled, charged with something unspoken, but he let it fade. Now wasn't the time. Later, as the storm cleared, they built a small fire under the overhang, the flames casting shadows on the cave walls. Tara and Marcus returned with news. The Fox was toast, but they'd salvaged a short-range comm and enough gear to hold out. Eli rigged a signal, broadcasting a distress call to any smugglers or scavengers in the sector. It was a long shot, but it was something. Lyra sat closer to Jake by the fire, her strength returning with the warmth. She adjusted his jacket over her shoulders, her fingers brushing his, and then, almost casually, shifted to straddle his lap. This fits wrong, she said, tugging at the collar with a faint smile. Her hips pressed against his, a subtle grind as she settled, her amber eyes glinting with mischief. Better now. Jake's breath caught, the heat of her body a sharp contrast to the cool air. Much, he managed, his hands resting lightly on her thighs. It was playful, intimate, but restrained, just enough to tease without crossing lines. She laughed, sliding off to sit beside him again, leaving him grinning like a fool. Then she went still, her hand pressing to her stomach. Jake, she said, her voice dropping. There's something else. He turned, frowning. What? The link, she said, meeting his eyes. When we broke the flame, it left something. I'm carrying it, a child. From us from that moment. Jake blinked, the words sinking in slow and heavy. A kid, he repeated, his mind reeling. You mean from the mind link? She nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and worry. It's not normal, not human, not Zethary. It's part of the flame's energy, maybe. I don't know what it'll be. He stared at her, then at the fire, processing. A kid, hers, there's tied to that cursed thing they destroyed. Well, damn, he said at last, a laugh escaping him. Guess we're in it deep now. Deeper than you think, Tara called from a cave's edge. She pointed upward, her face grim. The sky, clear now, shimmered with a faint distortion, a signal, pulsing red against the stars. That's Imperial. Too precise for a scan. Kael, Lyra whispered, her hand tightening on Jake's. He's alive. Or something is, Marcus said, standing with his rifle ready. Either way, they're coming. Jake pulled Lyra close, her warmth a shield against the chill creeping in. Let him, he said, his voice hard. We've beaten worse.